In this tutorial, we will learn how to reveal the inside of any model, using an animated custom shader which we can control real-time. This tutorial idea was sent to us by the Google, not that techno company. He is one of our beloved viewers, and we're extremely grateful to him. It can be very useful in product design, CAD/CAM, architectures and modeling, to demonstrate the internals of a model, like a car, or a building, or an apartment. So let's say we have created a model like this, and it has got many internal parts hidden inside the cover. And these individual parts have got many different materials assigned, as we can see in this list. This cover part, or the shell, has got a material which is named as shell material, and the node tree is here. Now we want to add a real transparency to this cover, so that the model displays perfectly when we render the scene. This material can be a simple one, or it may have some complex node trees, but finally it must have a material output node at the end, and just before this output, we need to add a transparent shader. So let's add a transparent BSDF node here, and to connect these two shaders, we need to bring one mix shader node. And remember that the transparent shader must go to its second socket, and the output of this mix shader should go to our final output. This is actually sufficient for cycles, but for Eevee, we need to also change this blend mode. If we select alpha blend, we'll get some transparency, but this can also give us a problem because sometimes the backside of the model may not be visible. So we'll rather go for alpha clip, and the clip value can be something like 0.5, but our motto is, we want to control this transparency dynamically using an empty. So we'll go to the add menu, and add an empty, and make it a little smaller in size. Now we want to access the position of this empty from the material created for this shell. We can access the position of an object using a texture coordinate node, but by default, this will give us the geometry of this part, for which we have actually created this material. Since we want to rather access the position of this empty, we need to first select that empty here, in this object list. Then we need to take its object output, and send it to another node called separate XYZ. Then, let's say we want to move the empty along this Y-axis, so we need to take this Y output, and connect it to the mix factor of our mix shader node. So the right half of the shell will get transparent, and if we move the empty like this, we can change the transparent part dynamically, and you can easily animate this effect. This is a great way to make a part of some object transparent, but we can do some more interesting things with a similar node setup. So instead of separate XYZ, we'll connect the position input of our empty from the texture coordinate to another node called gradient texture. Then we need to connect the output color of this node to the mix factor, and there are many gradient types here. We'll select the easing option. Now we'll see what it does to our model. If we grab and move our empty along this direction, the cover or the shell will become transparent along its width. So this is another way of making some part of an object transparent, so that we can clearly see through it. But that's not all. We can do one more thing. Instead of easing, let's select the quadratic sphere option. And in this case, we need to first revert the size of the empty back to the default size. The size of the empty plays an important role here, so what I have discovered is, we need to first multiply this location vector with a suitable value, using a vector multiply node, to enlarge the area of its influence. We'll use 0.2 here, and then connect it to the gradient texture. Now let's see why we said that it is so interesting. If we move our empty in any arbitrary direction, we can make any part of the shell transparent, as we can see here. It's no longer restricted to any particular axis. We can freely move the empty, and make the inside part visible on any particular area. And another important thing is, whatever we have discussed so far is primarily for Eevee, but there is a change for cycles, because it won't render correctly if we change over to the cycles engine. If we try to render this out, we'll get a solid output, without any transparency for the shell. We may not see any problem in the material view. Here everything works great, but when we render it using cycles, we don't get the same output. So we need to slightly change our shader node tree. Instead of connecting this gradient texture directly to the mix shader, we need to first pass it through a color ramp node. This will help us to shrink the wide range used by the gradient texture, and make it razor sharp. We need to bring these two handles of the color ramp very close to each other, somewhere near the midpoint. Their gap will define the sharpness of the transparent edge. Now if we render this out, we'll get a perfect result like Eevee, and the cycles output will look far better as usual. So I hope you liked this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.